The morning sun beat down on Westfield as Michael Thompson walked toward the corner store. At 32 years old, Michael had learned to navigate the world despite the challenges life had given him. Born deaf and living with cerebral palsy, he moved with a distinctive gait, his body sometimes working against his wishes. But he had his routines, and Tuesday mornings always meant picking up groceries and his weekly magazine. The bell above the door didn't make a sound to Michael's ears as he entered Wilson's Convenience. The cool air was a welcome relief from the summer heat. Old Mr. Wilson looked up from behind the counter and waved. After 5 years of Michael's weekly visits, the store owner had learned a few basic signs. He clumsily formed his hands to sign "Good morning," and Michael's face lit up with a smile. Michael headed to the refrigerated section, his movements deliberate as he focused on maintaining balance. His right arm tensed involuntarily as he reached for a carton of milk, knocking over a nearby stack of canned soup. The crash didn't register to Michael's ears, but he felt the vibration through the floor and immediately bent to clean up the mess, his movement slow but determined. Across the street, Officers Parker and Donovan sat in their patrol car, finishing paperwork from an earlier call. Parker, a veteran of 15 years on the force, had developed strong opinions about the changing neighborhood. Donovan was newer, just 3 years in, and still eager to prove himself to the older officers. Their radio crackled with a call about a disturbance at Wilson's Convenience. "Probably those kids again," Parker muttered, starting the engine. "Third time this month." They pulled up to the curb, and Officer Parker adjusted his belt as he stepped out of the car. Through the store window, he could see someone moving erratically near the back of the store. The officers entered, hands resting near their weapons. "What's going on here?" Parker called out, his voice sharp and authoritative. Mr. Wilson looked up, surprised. "Officers?" "I didn't call anyone." But Parker's attention had already fixed on Michael, who was still picking up cans, unaware of the new presence in the store. Michael's body jerked slightly as he worked, a natural symptom of his condition. "Sir, I need you to stand up slowly and face me," Parker commanded. Michael continued his task, not hearing the order. "Sir." "Police, stand up now!" Parker's voice rose, his hand moving to his holster. Mr. Wilson stepped forward quickly. "Wait, officers. He can't hear you. He's deaf and has cerebral palsy. He's a regular customer." Donovan hesitated, but Parker had already moved forward, interpreting the continued movement as defiance. "Sir, I won't ask again." Michael finally noticed the shadow falling over him and looked up. The sudden appearance of uniformed officers startled him, causing a reflexive spasm through his body. His arm jerked, sending a can rolling across the floor toward the officers. "He's reaching," Parker shouted, drawing his weapon. A woman shopping in the next aisle gasped. "No, he's not. He has a disability." Michael's eyes widened in fear. He raised his hands in what he hoped was a calming gesture, but his right arm trembled visibly from the stress, making the movement seem unpredictable. Donovan looked uncertain. "Parker, I think we should—" But Parker had already holstered his weapon and was moving to restrain Michael, grabbing his arm roughly. Michael, not understanding what was happening, tried to pull away and make the sign for wait with his free hand. Parker interpreted this as resistance. "Stop fighting," he barked, forcing Michael to the ground with a knee in his back. The sudden force caused Michael's body to tense further, his muscles contracting against his will. To Parker, it looked like deliberate resistance. "He's not fighting you," Mr. Wilson shouted, moving toward them. "He physically can't control those movements." Donovan put a hand out to stop the store owner. "Sir, stay back." By now a small crowd had gathered. A teenager had pulled out his phone and begun recording. 2 elderly shoppers watched in horror. A middle-aged man stepped forward. "Officers, please," he said. "I'm a physical therapist. What you're seeing is involuntary muscle movement from cerebral palsy. He's not resisting you." Parker glared at the man. "Stay out of police business." Michael tried desperately to communicate, his hands forming signs that none of the officers understood. His breathing became labored, panic making his condition worse as his body betrayed him with more spasms. "Look in his wallet," called Mr. Wilson. "He has a medical ID card. Front pocket." Donovan hesitated, then reached into Michael's pocket and pulled out the wallet. Inside was a clearly marked medical identification card stating Michael's name, condition, and that he was nonverbal and deaf. Donovan's face changed. "Parker, hold up. He's got medical ID here." But Parker was already cuffing Michael, whose fear and confusion were evident in his eyes as he looked up at the crowd, silently pleading for help. A woman in nurse's scrubs pushed her way forward. "You're hurting him." "Those restraints will cause him pain because of his condition. His muscles will contract against them." Michael's face contorted as the handcuffs dug into his wrists, his body's natural movements fighting against the metal. "This is wrong," someone in the crowd murmured, and others nodded in agreement. The teenager with the phone moved closer. "I'm recording everything," he announced loudly. "His name is Michael Thompson. He comes here all the time. Everyone knows him." Donovan looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Parker, I think we made a mistake here." Parker's jaw tightened. He was non-compliant with police orders because he couldn't hear them, Mr. Wilson said, his voice rising in frustration. "I tried to tell you that from the beginning." Michael's eyes darted around the store, tears forming as he tried to understand what was happening. He caught the eye of Mr. Wilson and managed to form a shaky sign with his cuffed hands. Mr. Wilson turned to the officers. "He's asking why. He wants to know what he did wrong." The atmosphere in the store had shifted. What had begun as a routine call was now being witnessed by half a dozen citizens, all clearly disturbed by what they were seeing. Donovan knelt beside Michael, speaking slowly and clearly in case he could read lips. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. We responded to a call about a disturbance." Michael couldn't understand him, but the change in body language was clear. He stopped struggling and tried to steady his breathing, though his muscles continued their involuntary movements. Parker stood firm. "We need to take him in for questioning." "Questioning?" The physical therapist looked incredulous. "How exactly do you plan to question someone who can't hear you and communicates through sign language? Do you have an interpreter at the station?" The question hung in the air. Parker didn't respond. The teenager's phone continued recording as he spoke. "This is going online as soon as I leave here. People need to see this." A new voice cut through the tension. "What's happening here?" Everyone turned to see a woman in a business suit standing in the doorway, her face a mixture of shock and anger. Lisa Thompson, Michael's sister and legal advocate, had stopped by the store on her way to work, something she rarely did. Today, that chance decision would change everything. "That's my brother," she said, moving quickly to Michael's side. "He's deaf and has cerebral palsy. What are you doing to him?" The dynamics shifted immediately. Lisa knelt beside Michael, signing rapidly to him. His body relaxed slightly at the familiar presence, though his muscles still trembled from stress. "Ma'am, we responded to a call about a disturbance," Donovan explained, his tone more measured now. "A disturbance?" Mr. Wilson scoffed. He knocked over some soup cans and was picking them up. "That's your disturbance." Lisa looked up at the officers, her eyes blazing. "Remove those handcuffs now, they're causing him pain." Parker hesitated, but Donovan had already moved to comply, carefully unlocking the restraints. Michael's wrists were red and marked where the cuffs had dug in against his involuntary movements. As Michael slowly sat up, Lisa continued signing to him, explaining what little she understood of the situation. The crowd watched in silent witness, the only sounds coming from the store's refrigeration units and the occasional click of the teenager's phone as he adjusted his recording angle. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. What had started as a typical Tuesday morning had become something much darker, a moment that would soon extend far beyond the walls of Wilson's convenience and into the consciousness of an entire community. Lisa Thompson stood protectively beside her brother Michael, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. The tension in Wilson's convenience store hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown thicker as more customers stopped to witness the scene. The teenage boy's phone camera continued to record, its small red light a reminder that everything happening now would soon be viewed by countless others. "My brother has done nothing wrong," Lisa said firmly, her eyes locked with Officer Parker's. "He was simply shopping and had an accident with some cans." Parker's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. "Ma'am, when someone fails to comply with police orders, he's deaf," Lisa cut in, her voice rising slightly. "He literally cannot hear your orders. That's what everyone here has been trying to tell you." Michael looked between his sister and the officers, his eyes wide with confusion and lingering fear. His right hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the constant subtle movements his cerebral palsy caused. He signed something to Lisa, his movements quick and worried. He wants to know if he's in trouble, Lisa translated, her voice softening as she turned back to the officers. He's asking what he did wrong. Officer Donovan stepped forward, positioning himself slightly between Parker and the Thompsons. There appears to have been a misunderstanding, he said, glancing at his partner. We received a call about a disturbance, which I didn't make, Mr. Wilson interjected from behind the counter. Michael's been coming here every Tuesday for years. He's never caused any problems. The physical therapist who had spoken up earlier moved closer. Officers, I work with patients who have cerebral palsy. What you interpreted as resistance was involuntary muscle movement. It's physically impossible for him to remain completely still, especially when stressed. Parker's radio crackled and he stepped away to respond. The other customers in the store had formed a loose semicircle, their grocery baskets temporarily forgotten. An older woman with silver hair shook her head sadly. I've seen that young man around the neighborhood for years, she said to no one in particular. Always polite, always minding his own business. Michael tapped Lisa's arm and signed again, more urgently this time. He's asking if we can leave, Lisa translated, looking at Donovan. Are you detaining him, officer? Because if not, I'd like to take my brother home. This has been traumatic enough. Donovan hesitated, glancing toward Parker, who was still speaking into his radio with his back turned. Let them go, said the teenager with the phone. He couldn't have been more than 16, but there was an edge to his voice that belied his age. You guys messed up. Just admit it and let them go. Several onlookers murmured in agreement. The atmosphere was shifting from tense observation to active disapproval. Parker turned back from his radio call. His expression hardened. We still need to file a report about the incident. What incident? Lisa demanded. The incident where 2 police officers harassed and manhandled a deaf man with cerebral palsy for the crime of knocking over soup cans? Mr. Wilson moved from behind his counter, standing beside the Thompsons. Officers, I'm not pressing any charges. Nothing was damaged. There was no crime committed in my store today, at least not by Michael. The implication hung in the air. Parker's face flushed slightly. We're just doing our job, sir, he said, his tone clipped. No, said the physical therapist. You're not. Your job includes recognizing disabilities and responding appropriately. There are protocols for interacting with deaf individuals and people with movement disorders. Michael signed something else to Lisa, his movements becoming more agitated as his anxiety increased. The spasms in his right arm worsened visibly. He needs his medication, Lisa explained. This stress is making his symptoms worse. Donovan nodded. You should take him home then. Parker stepped forward. We're not finished here. Yes, we are, Donovan said firmly, surprising everyone, including his partner. These people have done nothing wrong. We made a mistake. The look Parker gave Donovan could have frozen water. We need to discuss this outside, he said through clenched teeth. As the officers moved toward the door, Michael suddenly signed something urgent to Lisa. She nodded and called after them. Officer Parker, she said, my brother wants to know your badge number. Parker stopped, turned slowly. Excuse me? Your badge number, Lisa repeated. He has the right to ask for it. The teenage boy adjusted his phone, making sure he captured this exchange. Other customers watched intently, the store unnaturally quiet except for the humming of refrigerators. Parker's hand moved to his badge. 7493, he said, his voice flat. Michael nodded slightly, his fingers spelling out the numbers to himself, committing them to memory. He then looked at Donovan questioningly. Donovan didn't wait to be asked. 8217, he said, his tone much gentler than his partner's. Parker pushed the door open harder than necessary, stepping into the sunlight. Donovan lingered for a moment. I apologize for the misunderstanding, he said, not quite meeting Lisa's eyes. Have a good day. As the door swung shut behind him, the collective tension in the store broke. Several customers approached the Thompsons, offering support or simply touching Michael's shoulder gently as they passed. The teenager with the phone finally lowered it but didn't stop recording. I got it all, he told Lisa. Every second. My name's Tyler. If you need this video, just let me know. Lisa thanked him, then turned to help Michael to his feet. His body was still tense, movements less coordinated than usual because of the stress. Mr. Wilson hurried over with a chair. Sit, he insisted. Take your time. There's no rush. Through the front windows, they could see the officers in what appeared to be a heated discussion beside their patrol car. Parker gestured emphatically, pointing back at the store several times. Donovan stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head. "This isn't over," the physical therapist said quietly, watching the officers. "You should file a complaint." Lisa nodded as she helped Michael take his medication. "Oh, we will. This isn't the first time Michael has been mistreated because of his disability, but I'm going to make damn sure it's the last." Michael signed something, and Lisa's expression softened. "He says thank you to everyone who spoke up for him today." Mr. Wilson patted Michael's shoulder. "That's what community is for, son." Outside, the officers' discussion had escalated. Parker suddenly threw his hands up in frustration and stalked to the driver's side of the patrol car. Donovan remained where he was for a moment, then slowly walked to the passenger side. As they drove away, Tyler held up his phone. "Already uploading," he said, tagged with both their badge numbers and the precinct. Within an hour, the video was online. By that evening, it had been viewed thousands of times. Local news stations picked it up for their evening broadcasts, the anchors using careful language about alleged misconduct, while the footage played silently beside them. In the Thompson household, Michael sat in his favorite chair, still shaken by the morning's events. Lisa was on the phone in the kitchen, her voice rising and falling as she spoke with a lawyer friend. Their parents had arrived as soon as they heard, their father's face tight with anger, their mother fussing over Michael, checking his wrists where the handcuffs had left faint marks. Michael's phone lit up with text messages from friends who had seen the video. He read each one, responding slowly, his fingers still slightly unsteady. One message caught his attention, from his deaf studies professor at the community college where Michael took classes twice a week. "This is wrong," the message read, "but you have power here. Your story matters. How can I help?" Michael stared at those words for a long time. Your story matters. For years, he had navigated a world that often overlooked people like him, that misinterpreted his movements, that grew impatient with his method of communication. He had learned to make himself smaller, less noticeable, to avoid exactly the kind of confrontation that had happened today. But now thousands of people had seen what happened to him. They had witnessed the misunderstanding, the escalation, the fear. Maybe this was a chance to make a difference, not just for himself but for others with disabilities who encountered law enforcement. He typed a reply to his professor. "I want to speak up. I want to tell my story." As he pressed send, he could hear Lisa's voice from the kitchen still on the phone. "No, we're not letting this go," she was saying. Two officers with 15 years of training between them couldn't recognize a deaf man with cerebral palsy, couldn't take 10 seconds to listen to the people trying to explain his condition. "No, this ends here." Michael leaned back in his chair, feeling strangely calm despite the day's events. Something had shifted inside him. Where there had been fear, there was now resolve. Where there had been shame, there was now clarity. This wasn't just about one bad morning or two misguided officers. This was about being seen. Really seen. And for perhaps the first time in his life, Michael Thompson felt truly visible. 3 days had passed since the incident at Wilson's convenience store. 3 days that felt like 3 years to Michael Thompson and his family. The video that Tyler had uploaded had not just gone viral, it had exploded. What began as a local story quickly spread across social media platforms, news outlets, and dinner table conversations throughout the city and beyond. On this particular evening, the community center on Maple Street was filled beyond capacity. People stood along the walls, sat cross-legged on the floor, and crowded the doorways. The room hummed with conversation, with anger, with purpose. At the front, a small stage had been set up with a table, microphones, and notably an ASL interpreter. Lisa Thompson checked her watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. Her brother Michael sat beside her in a small room off the main hall, his hands moving in quick, nervous signs. "Yes, there are a lot of people," Lisa signed back. "They're here for you." "For us?" Michael's expression remained uncertain. He hadn't expected this kind of turnout. When his deaf studies professor had suggested organizing a community meeting, he had imagined maybe 20 or 30 people, not hundreds. A knock on the door made them both look up. Tyler, the teenager who had recorded the video, poked his head in. "They're ready whenever you are," he said. "And, there are some news vans outside now." Lisa nodded, turning to her brother. "Ready?" she signed. Michael took a deep breath, steadying the natural tremor in his hands as much as he could. He nodded once firmly. Walking onto the stage felt like stepping into a spotlight that was both too bright and too hot. Michael could feel eyes on him, hundreds of them, as he made his way to the table. The interpreter, a woman named Grace who had worked with Michael before, gave him an encouraging smile. Lisa took the microphone first, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Thank you all for coming tonight," she began. 3 days ago, my brother Michael went to buy groceries, something he's done every Tuesday for years. What should have been a routine errand turned into a nightmare when 2 police officers mistook his disability for non-compliance. As Lisa spoke, Grace interpreted for Michael and other deaf attendees. Michael watched the crowd, taking in their expressions: anger, sympathy, determination. "The video you've all seen shows only part of what happened," Lisa continued. "What it doesn't show is the years of similar incidents that people with disabilities face. The constant misunderstandings, the fear, the knowledge that at any moment, someone might misinterpret your movements or your silence and escalate a situation unnecessarily." In the front row, Mr. Wilson from the convenience store nodded gravely. Beside him sat the physical therapist who had intervened, along with several of Michael's classmates from the community college. "Tonight isn't just about what happened to Michael," Lisa said. "It's about making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." When she finished her introduction, Michael tapped the table twice, their prearranged signal. It was his turn. Lisa stepped back and Grace moved closer, ready to voice Michael's signs for the audience. His hands began to move, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. Grace's voice filled the room. "All my life I have worked to be independent," she translated as Michael signed. "I have a job. I take classes. I have friends and hobbies. But I also live with the knowledge that many people see my deafness and my cerebral palsy before they see me." The room was utterly silent now, save for Grace's voice and the occasional click of a camera. What happened on Tuesday wasn't new. It wasn't surprising. It was just the first time someone was recording. Michael's hands moved expressively as Grace continued to translate. "I've been ignored by doctors who speak to my sister instead of looking at me. I've been followed in stores by security guards who think my movements are suspicious. I've had people speak loudly and slowly to me, as if volume could cure deafness." A soft ripple of knowing laughter moved through the crowd at this last part. Michael's lips curved in a slight smile before he continued. "But Tuesday was different. Tuesday was the first time I felt afraid for my life." The weight of those words settled over the room like a heavy blanket. In the back, someone sniffled. I couldn't hear the officer's commands. I couldn't understand why they were angry. I couldn't control how my body responded to stress. Everything I did made the situation worse in their eyes. Michael paused, looking directly at the audience now. "I am not angry at these officers because they didn't understand my disability. I am angry because they didn't try to understand. They didn't listen to the people telling them I was deaf. They didn't pause to consider why I might not be responding. They saw difference and they assumed danger." Near the middle of the room, a man in a police uniform shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't from the same precinct as Parker and Donovan, but he felt the weight of Michael's words nonetheless. "I don't want apologies," Michael continued, his signs becoming more emphatic. "I want change. I want training. I want accountability." The crowd erupted in applause, many people raising their hands and shaking them silently, the deaf applause that Michael was used to from his classes. The sight brought unexpected tears to his eyes. After Michael finished, others came forward to share their stories. A mother spoke about her autistic son's terrifying encounter with police, who misinterpreted his stimming as aggression. A man in a wheelchair described being unable to comply with an officer's command to get out of his car during a traffic stop. A deaf woman recounted calling 911 via video relay during an emergency, only to have officers arrive with guns drawn because they thought the interpreter was a third party reporting a crime. As each person spoke, the pattern became clearer. This wasn't about isolated incidents. This was systemic. Toward the end of the meeting, a woman made her way to the front. She introduced herself as Councilwoman Rivera from the city's 6th District. "I've heard enough tonight to know that we have a serious problem," she said, her voice firm. "Next week I'll be introducing a proposal to the City Council for mandatory disability awareness training for all police officers. And I want Mr. Thompson and others affected to be part of developing that training." The announcement was met with cautious optimism. It was a start, at least. As the meeting wound down, people formed a line to speak with Michael. Grace stayed by his side, interpreting each conversation. Some simply wanted to express support. Others shared their own stories. A few asked how they could help. One young police cadet approached hesitantly. "I'm in the academy now," he told Michael through Grace. "What would you want someone like me to know? To do differently?" Michael considered the question carefully before signing his response. "See the person first," Grace voiced for him. "Take an extra 30 seconds to assess a situation before acting. Listen to bystanders. And remember that compliance might look different for different bodies." The cadet nodded thoughtfully, thanking Michael before moving on. By the time the community center began emptying out, it was past 10 o'clock. Michael's hands were tired from all the signing, and his muscles ached from sitting tensely for hours, but despite the physical discomfort, he felt a strange sense of peace. Lisa helped gather their things as the last few people filtered out. "You did good," she told him, her sign simple but proud. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing after the stuffiness of the packed room. As they walked to the car, Michael noticed a figure leaning against a lamppost nearby. It took him a moment to recognize Officer Donovan out of uniform. Lisa noticed him too and stiffened slightly. "What do you want?" she asked aloud, her hand finding Michael's arm protectively. Donovan straightened up, hands open at his sides in a non-threatening gesture. "I saw the news vans," he said. "I wasn't inside, but I wanted to say something to your brother if that's okay." Lisa looked at Michael, who nodded cautiously. "I can sign a little," Donovan said, surprising them both. He formed clumsy but recognizable signs as he spoke. "I'm sorry. I should have done better." The admission was simple, but the effort to communicate directly with Michael, rather than through Lisa, spoke volumes. Michael studied the officer for a long moment before raising his own hands to respond. Lisa translated for Donovan where his basic sign knowledge fell short. "Thank you for that," Michael signed. "But this isn't about one good officer or one bad one. It's about a system that needs to change." Donovan nodded soberly. "I know, and for what it's worth. There's a lot of talk at the station right now. People saw the video. Some officers are defensive, but others, they're asking questions. They're uncomfortable, and maybe that discomfort is where change begins." As they drove home later, Michael stared out the window at the passing streetlights. The day had been exhausting, emotionally and physically. But for the first time since the incident, he felt something like hope stirring. His phone buzzed with a text from his professor. "You started something important today." Michael looked at the message for a long moment before typing his reply. "No, we did." The police station buzzed with unusual tension. 2 weeks had passed since the incident at Wilson's convenience store, and what had started as a local controversy had evolved into a full-blown internal investigation. Captain Rivera, no relation to the councilwoman, though he'd clarified this multiple times to the press, sat at his desk, staring at the stack of files before him. The largest file belonged to Officer Parker. 15 years on the force, generally good performance reviews, a few complaints that had been dismissed over the years, nothing that had raised serious red flags until now. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Lieutenant Washington entered without waiting for a response, a tablet in her hand. "The body camera footage is ready," she said, her expression giving nothing away. Captain Rivera nodded. "Let's see it." The footage from Parker's camera began with the officers pulling up to Wilson's convenience store. The angle showed the sidewalk, then the store's interior as they entered. Parker's voice came through clearly as he called out to Michael Thompson, who was still picking up cans, unaware of their presence. "Sir, I need you to stand up slowly and face me." No response. "Sir, police, stand up now." The captain watched as the situation unfolded exactly as the viral video had shown, but now with the added perspective of hearing everything the officers said. He winced as Parker's voice grew increasingly hostile despite multiple bystanders trying to explain Michael's condition. "He's not complying," Parker muttered at one point, low enough that the civilians probably couldn't hear. But the camera picked it up. "These people always think they're above the law." The captain paused the video. "These people?" Did he specify who he meant by that? Lieutenant Washington's expression tightened slightly. "Keep watching," the video continued. Parker's commentary became more problematic as the situation escalated. Comments about troublemakers in this neighborhood and people who think they're special peppered his muttering. When they reached the part where Lisa Thompson arrived and confronted the officers, the captain paused again. "Show me Donovan's footage from this point," he said. The lieutenant switched to the other body camera, showing a different angle of the same scene. The difference was striking. Where Parker's camera showed mostly the floor and occasionally Lisa's face when he looked up, Donovan's camera captured the full scene. Michael's obvious distress, the concerned crowd, the way Lisa positioned herself protectively beside her brother. More importantly, it captured the conversation between the two officers when they stepped outside. "You know we messed up in there," Donovan said, keeping his voice low. "We did our job," Parker insisted. "If these people would just comply with simple commands." "He's deaf, Parker. Deaf, he couldn't hear your commands." "So he says." "So everyone in the store said." "Did you even look at his medical ID?" The argument continued, growing more heated. Parker's comments became increasingly problematic, with clear implications about his views on people with disabilities and racial minorities. The captain's face darkened as he listened. When the footage ended, the room fell silent. "There's more," Lieutenant Washington said after a moment. "We pulled their text messages from their department phones." She handed over a printed report. The captain skimmed it, his frown deepening. The messages between Parker and another officer from a different precinct contained explicitly racist language and derogatory terms for people with disabilities. One message sent just after the incident read, "Had to deal with some deaf guy causing trouble. Like being deaf makes you special. Should have seen his sister. Typical attitude. Acting like we're the bad guys for doing our job." The captain placed the report on his desk, removed his glasses, and rubbed his eyes. "The Internal Affairs interview is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Lieutenant Washington said. "Both officers," the captain nodded. "Make sure Thompson's lawyer is notified. They have a right to know where we are in the process." Lisa Thompson sat across from her brother at their parents' dining table. Their mother had made Michael's favorite lasagna, but he'd barely touched it. He kept checking his phone, waiting for news. "The lawyer said these investigations take time," Lisa signed to him. "We might not hear anything today." Michael sighed, setting his phone down. "It's been 2 weeks," he signed back. "How much more time do they need?" "The video shows everything." Their father, watching the exchange, put down his fork. "The system protects its own," he signed, his movements sharp with anger. "Always has." Their mother shot him a warning look. "Let's not assume the worst," she signed. "Things are different now. The video has over 1 million views. The whole city is watching how the department handles this." Michael's phone buzzed, and he grabbed it quickly. His expression changed as he read the message. "It's from Grace," he signed, referring to the interpreter who had helped at the community meeting. "She says a reporter wants to interview me for the evening news. They're doing a special report on police interactions with the disabled community." Lisa looked thoughtful. "That could be good. More visibility means more pressure on the department." Michael nodded slowly. "I'll do it," he signed. "But I want to tell the whole story, not just what happened at the store. I want to talk about what it's like living in this city, being both black and disabled, how I'm always having to prove myself worthy of basic respect." His mother reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "I'm proud of you," she signed with her free hand. Just then, Lisa's phone rang. She checked the caller ID and quickly answered. "Yes, this is Lisa Thompson," she said, automatically signing her words so Michael could follow. "Yes, he's right here with me." She listened for a moment, her expression giving nothing away. "I understand. Yes, we'll be there. Thank you for calling." When she hung up, 3 pairs of eyes stared at her expectantly. "That was the police department," she signed and spoke simultaneously. "Internal Affairs wants us to come in tomorrow at 9 a.m. They've finished their preliminary investigation." Across town, Officer Donovan sat on a park bench, watching his 6-year-old daughter play on the swings. His wife Karen sat beside him, her hand resting on his knee. "What did Internal Affairs say exactly?" she asked. Donovan kept his eyes on their daughter. "They want me back tomorrow morning. They've reviewed all the footage. They asked about my history with Parker, if I'd ever witnessed similar behavior before." "And had you?" He hesitated. "Nothing this bad. Comments here and there. The kind of stuff most officers would just ignore or laugh off." Karen's hand tightened on his knee. "But you didn't report it?" "No." The single word hung between them, heavy with implication. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked after a moment. I don't know for sure, but I think they're going to fire Parker. And I think they're deciding what to do with me. Karen looked alarmed. They can't fire you too. You tried to de-escalate the situation. After it had already gone too far, Donovan said quietly. I knew Parker had issues. I'd heard him make comments before. I requested a different partner twice, but I never filed a formal complaint. I never officially reported anything. He ran a hand through his hair. In their eyes, that makes me complicit. Their daughter called from the swings, wanting her father to push her higher. Donovan managed to smile and a wave. 1 minute, sweetie. Karen watched him, worry etching lines around her eyes. Are you going to be okay? If they do fire you? The question was layered with meaning. Financial concerns, career implications, emotional impact. I don't know, he admitted. But I keep thinking about that man, Michael Thompson. How scared he must have been, not being able to hear what was happening or why. Having someone pin him down when his body can't even stay still naturally. He shook his head. If they fire me, maybe I deserve it. The next morning, the Thompson family arrived at the police station precisely at 9. Michael wore a suit, the one he usually saved for special occasions, and his hair was neatly trimmed. Lisa walked beside him, their parents following closely behind. A small crowd of supporters had gathered outside the station, holding signs with messages like Justice for Michael and Deaf Lives Matter and Police Accountability Now. Inside, they were led to a conference room where 3 people waited: Captain Rivera, Lieutenant Washington, and a woman who introduced herself as the department's legal counsel. Grace, Michael's interpreter, had been arranged for by the police department and arrived moments after they did. After everyone was seated, Captain Rivera cleared his throat. Thank you for coming in today, he began, looking directly at Michael as he spoke, allowing Grace time to interpret. We've completed our internal investigation into the incident at Wilson's convenience store on August 3rd. Michael sat very still, his natural tremor the only movement in his body. Lisa reached over and squeezed his hand. Based on body camera footage, witness statements, the viral video, and other evidence, we have determined that Officers Parker and Donovan violated multiple departmental policies during their interaction with you. Mr. Thompson, the captain slid a folder across the table. This contains a full copy of our findings, which your lawyer is welcome to review. In summary, Officer Parker has been terminated effective immediately. His conduct violated our use of force policies, escalation protocols, and our standards for interacting with disabled individuals. Additionally, subsequent investigation revealed a pattern of concerning behavior and communications that are incompatible with our department's values. Michael and Lisa exchanged a glance. Their father leaned forward slightly. And Officer Donovan? Lisa asked. The captain's expression was carefully neutral. Officer Donovan has been suspended for 30 days without pay. While he attempted to de-escalate the situation, he failed in his duty to intervene earlier and to report previous concerning behavior from his partner. Upon his return, he will be reassigned and required to complete additional training. Is that all? Lisa couldn't keep the edge from her voice. A month's suspension? Lieutenant Washington spoke up. Officer Donovan has also volunteered to work with our new disability response training program, sharing his perspective on what went wrong that day and how officers can do better. He's been very cooperative with our investigation and provided key evidence regarding Officer Parker's pattern of behavior. Michael tapped the table to get everyone's attention, then began to sign. Grace voiced his words. I understand the desire to protect your officers, she translated, but this isn't just about punishment. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again to anyone. What systemic changes are you making? The captain nodded, seeming to appreciate the question. Councilwoman Rivera's proposal for mandatory disability awareness training has been approved. All officers will complete this training within the next 6 months with annual refreshers. We're also implementing new protocols for responding to situations involving deaf individuals or people with other disabilities. He hesitated, then added, and we'd like your help, Mr. Thompson. Your perspective would be invaluable in developing these trainings. Michael looked surprised. He hadn't expected to be invited to the table. After a moment, he nodded slowly. I'll think about it. He signed, Grace's voice carrying his words. But first I want to see those new protocols. I want to know they have real teeth. The captain slid another document across the table. This is just a draft. We welcome your input. As the meeting continued, Michael realized this was both an ending and a beginning. Justice for what had happened to him was important, but the chance to prevent it from happening to others, that was something worth fighting for. 6 months had passed since that Tuesday morning at Wilson's convenience store. The leaves had changed, fallen, and given way to a light dusting of snow that crunched beneath Michael Thompson's shoes as he made his way up the steps of the police academy. He paused at the entrance, his breath forming small clouds in the December air. The tremor in his right hand was more pronounced today, partly from the cold, partly from nerves. This would be his 5th training session with new police cadets, but the butterflies in his stomach hadn't diminished. Lisa had offered to come with him, but he'd declined. This was something he needed to do on his own. Inside, the lobby was warm and busy. A desk sergeant looked up as Michael approached, recognition dawning on his face. Without Michael having to say anything, the sergeant picked up his phone and sent a quick text. 1 minute later, Officer Donovan appeared through a side door. "Good morning, Michael," he signed, his movements more fluid and confident than they had been months ago. He'd been taking ASL classes 3 nights a week since returning from his suspension. Michael nodded in greeting, signing back. "Ready for today?" "They're waiting for us," Donovan responded, leading the way down a corridor to a large classroom. 24 cadets sat in neat rows, their uniforms crisp, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and attentiveness. At the front of the room stood Captain Rivera and Lieutenant Washington, along with Grace, who would be interpreting. As Michael took his place at the front, he felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. Public speaking had never been his thing, even with an interpreter. But some things were more important than comfort. Captain Rivera introduced him, explaining to the cadets that today's session was part of their new mandatory training on interactions with disabled civilians. When he finished, Michael stepped forward and began to sign. Grace's voice filled the room as she interpreted. 6 months ago, I went to buy milk and ended up handcuffed on a convenience store floor, he began, not bothering with pleasantries. I couldn't hear the commands being shouted at me. I couldn't keep my body perfectly still because of my cerebral palsy. And because of those things I cannot change about myself, I was treated as a threat. The cadets watched intently. Some took notes. A few shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I'm not here to make you feel guilty, Michael continued. I'm here because what happened to me happens to disabled people across this country every day. And unlike many of them, I got something resembling justice. The officer who used excessive force was fired. New training programs, like this one, were implemented. Changes were made. Michael paused, making eye contact with several of the cadets before continuing. But justice isn't just about punishment after something goes wrong. True justice would mean these incidents never happen in the first place. For the next hour, Michael shared his experience in detail, then opened the floor for questions. The cadets were hesitant at first, but slowly hands began to rise. How should we approach someone who might be deaf? Asked one young woman in the front row. Get in their line of sight, Michael signed as Grace voiced his response. Use visual cues. If possible, find an interpreter or write things down. Most importantly, don't assume non-compliance means disrespect or threat. Another cadet raised his hand. What about in emergency situations when there isn't time for all that? Michael nodded, acknowledging the valid concern. That's why deaf people and people with other disabilities need to be part of your training before emergencies happen. You need to have tools and protocols already in place, not trying to figure it out in the moment. By the end of the session, the initial awkwardness had given way to engaged discussion. As the cadets filed out, several approached Michael directly, attempting basic signs they'd learned or simply offering a respectful handshake. When the room had emptied, Donovan approached. That went well, he signed. Michael nodded, but his expression remained serious. It's a start. But we're not just trying to change a few officers' minds. We're trying to change a system. Across town, in a small office filled with potted plants and motivational posters, Former Officer Parker sat across from his therapist. It was their 12th session. "How was your week?" Dr. Chen asked, his voice neutral. Parker stared at his hands. "I had the interview at the security company. I think it went okay. They know about everything. The firing, the video." "And how did that feel, discussing it with them?" "Humiliating," Parker admitted. "But necessary, I guess, part of the accountability process you keep talking about." Dr. Chen nodded. "And the anger management classes?" "Still going. Still hate them." Parker attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But I haven't punched any walls this month, so maybe they're working." The therapist made a note. "Last week we talked about the resentment you still feel toward the department. Has that changed at all?" Parker sighed heavily. "Some days are better than others. I still think 15 years of service should have counted for something. One bad call and suddenly I'm the villain in everyone's story." "Was it just one bad call, though?" Dr. Chen asked quietly. "Or was it a pattern of behavior that finally became visible?" Parker didn't answer immediately. The question hung in the air between them. "My daughter asked me last night why I don't wear my uniform anymore," he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's 7. How do I explain to her that Daddy lost his job because he hurt someone who didn't deserve it? How do I tell her that I said things, texted things that I wouldn't want her to ever hear?" "Perhaps," Dr. Chen suggested, "you start by telling her the same thing you're learning here. That everyone makes mistakes, that the important thing is to acknowledge them, learn from them, and do better." Parker nodded slowly. "I'm trying. Some days it's harder than others." The Thompson family living room was crowded with people, the air filled with the sense of holiday cooking and the visual noise of animated conversation, both spoken and signed. It was their annual holiday gathering, but this year felt different. There were new faces among the familiar ones. Tyler, the teenager who had recorded the viral video, sat on the couch chatting with Michael's cousin. He'd become something of an honorary family member in the past months. Grace, the interpreter, was there too, though technically off-duty, laughing at something Michael's father had signed. And somewhat surprisingly, Donovan and his wife and daughter had accepted the invitation to stop by, though they had politely declined staying for dinner. Lisa watched her brother from across the room. He was engaged in an animated conversation with Councilwoman Rivera, who had become a strong ally in their advocacy work. The changes in Michael over the past 6 months were subtle, but profound. He stood straighter. He signed with more confidence. He no longer tried to minimize his tremor or make himself less noticeable in public spaces. Her phone buzzed with a text from their lawyer. "Settlement approved by City Council. We'll call with details tomorrow." Lisa smiled, slipping the phone back into her pocket without showing Michael. That news could wait until after the holidays. Tonight was for celebration, not business. Their mother appeared at her side, handing her a mug of hot chocolate. "He's doing well, isn't he?" she said, following Lisa's gaze to Michael. "Better than well," Lisa replied. "He's thriving," and it was true. What had begun as a traumatic incident had evolved into something transformative. Michael had discovered a voice he didn't know he possessed and a strength he'd always had, but rarely needed to use. The past 6 months had seen him speak at community meetings, consult on police training protocols, and even testify before the state legislature about a bill to fund disability awareness programs for law enforcement. The doorbell rang, and Lisa went to answer it. A delivery person stood on the porch with a large envelope. "Delivery for Michael Thompson," they said, handing over a package that required a signature. Back inside, Lisa found her brother and handed him the envelope. "For you." Michael opened it curiously, pulling out an official-looking certificate. His eyes widened as he read. Then he quickly signed to Grace, who had come over to see what was happening. "It's from the mayor's office," Grace interpreted for the benefit of those who didn't sign. "They're honoring Michael with the Citizen Advocacy Award at next month's ceremony." A cheer went up around the room. Michael blushed, unused to being the center of such attention. When the excitement died down, he signed something directly to Lisa. "What did he say?" their mother asked, not catching all the signs. Lisa smiled. "He said, 'Not bad for a Tuesday milk run.'" Later, as guests began to leave, Donovan approached Michael one last time. "I wanted you to know," he signed, his movement still sometimes hesitant but clear enough. The new training program is being adopted by 3 other precincts in neighboring counties. Your story is changing things beyond just our department. Michael nodded, taking this in. Good, he signed simply. That was always the goal. Not just justice for me, but safety for everyone like me. After all the guests had left and the house was quiet, Michael sat on the back porch despite the cold, looking up at the winter stars. 6 months ago, his world had been shaken, his sense of security shattered. The road since then hadn't been easy. There had been nightmares, anxiety attacks, days when he'd wanted to retreat from the advocacy work and just go back to his quiet life. But sitting there under the vast, silent sky, Michael felt a sense of peace that had been elusive for months. What had happened to him was wrong. It should never have happened. But the response from his community, from the department, from himself, had created ripples that were still spreading outward, touching lives he would never even know. His phone lit up with a text from one of the cadets he'd trained that morning. Thank you for today. I'll remember your story every time I put on the uniform. Michael smiled slightly, typing his response. That's all I can ask for. He stayed on the porch a while longer, watching his breath form clouds in the cold night air. The world wasn't fixed. There would be other incidents, other injustices. The system wouldn't change overnight, but it was changing. Bit by bit, story by story, person by person, and sometimes that was enough.